Subscribe to my YouTube channel right now because you're about to dive into a tale so wild, so tangled, you won't believe it's my life. Picture this. Me, standing in my kitchen, a faded recipe card in hand, staring down my daughter as she screams, "You're ruining everything." My son's pacing the hall, muttering about betrayal. And my grandkids? They're plotting something. I can feel it. All because of a dish I dug up from the past. How did a forgotten recipe turn my family into a war zone? Stick around, because this story's just getting started. I've always been a keeper of relics, bent spoons, faded photos, secrets nobody else dares touch. So when I found that brittle recipe card in Harold's old tackle box, stained with ink and something darker, I should have burned it. "Widow's stew," it said, in his shaky scrawl. "Potatoes, thyme, a cryptic drop of midnight." At the bottom, a warning. "Serve with caution, Agnes. It wakes what sleeps." Harold's been dead a decade, but his words felt alive, clawing at me from the grave. The house was too still that morning, my kids ignoring my calls, so I lit the stove. The air thickened as I sliced potatoes, their skins peeling like whispers. Thyme hit the pot, sharp and accusing. The drop of midnight? I figured it was Harold's flair, maybe ink, maybe wine. I splashed in some vinegar and watched it hiss. The stew simmered, dark and oily, and I swear the steam curled into shapes, faces maybe. I shook it off, just an old woman's eyes playing tricks. Then the door crashed open. Lila stormed in, her face pale as death. "What is that?" she choked, clutching her throat like the smell was a noose. My grandkids, Timmy and Rose, peeked from behind her, wide-eyed, like I'd summoned a beast. "It's your father's stew," I said, stirring slow. "Found his recipe today." Lila's voice dropped to a hiss. "Dad's stew? The one he made the night the barn caught fire? You said it was cursed. You said we'd never speak of it." I chuckled, but it sounded hollow. "That was years ago. It's just food." "Food," she spat. "That smell, it's not right. It's like rot and promises." She gagged and Timmy whispered to Rose, "It's alive, I bet." "Stop it," I snapped, but the pot bubbled louder, like it heard them. Jack slunk and then, his shadow stretching too long across the floor. "Mom, what's that stench? You trying to summon Dad or kill us?" "It's nostalgia," I said, defiant. "Your father's legacy." "Legacy?" Jack's laugh was a blade. His legacy was chaos. "And now you're cooking it." The stew thickened, black as tar, and I caught a whiff, something metallic, wrong. Rose tugged my sleeve. "Nana, it's moving." I glanced down. A ripple crossed the surface, slow and deliberate. My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile. "It's just steam, sweetie." Lila grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "Throw it out. Now. Before it's too late." "Too late for what?" I yanked free. "It's dinner. You're all acting like I've lost my mind." "You have," she shrieked. "You're stirring up something evil." The lights flickered. A spoon clattered off the counter. By itself. Jack swore, backing up. "Mom, this isn't funny. Dump it." "No." I clutched the ladle like a weapon. "It's all I have left of him." Timmy giggled nervously. "Maybe it's Grandpa's ghost soup." Rose elbowed him, but her eyes were huge, darting to the pot. "Enough," I roared. "Sit down and eat, or leave." They sat, but the air crackled. I ladled out the stew, each bowl landing with a thud. Lila stared at hers, trembling. Jack poked his with a spoon, muttering, "If I die, I'm haunting you." The kids slurped theirs, then froze. Timmy gagged, "It tastes like secrets." Rose nodded, whispering, "And bones." I took a bite. It burned, hot, bitter, alive. My vision blurred, and for a second, I saw Harold at the table, grinning, his teeth too sharp. I blinked. He was gone. The stew stayed quiet after that, but the room didn't. Lila sobbed, "You've doomed us." Jack glared, "You're unhinged." The kids whispered about the stew's eyes. That night, I dreamed of Harold laughing, the pot boiling over with shadows. I woke to a crash downstairs. Lila screaming, Jack shouting, the kids giggling like maniacs. The stew was back on the stove, simmering, though I'd dumped it out. Harold's note sat beside it, fresh ink gleaming. Told you, Agnes. It wakes what sleeps. I stood there in the dim kitchen, the stew bubbling like it owned the place, though I'd scraped every last drop into the trash hours ago. The air was heavy, thick with that metallic tang, and Harold's note glared at me from the counter. Told you, Agnes. It wakes what sleeps. My hands shook as I grabbed the paper, meaning to rip it up, but Lila's scream cut through the house like a siren.
Mom.
Get down here now. Her voice cracked, raw with panic. I bolted downstairs, the note crumpled in my fist. Lila was in the living room, clutching a lamp like a club, her hair wild. Jack paced behind her, phone in hand, muttering, "This isn't happening." Timmy and Rose huddled on the couch, giggling into their sleeves, their eyes glinting with something I didn't trust. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I meant. Lila pointed a trembling finger at the fireplace. Look, the hearth was cold and used for months, but there it was, a bowl of widow's stew, steaming, perched on the mantel like an offering. The dark broth rippled, and I swear I saw a finger of steam reach out, then snap back. My knees wobbled. "I didn't put that there," I whispered. "No kidding," Jack snapped, shoving his phone at me. "I took a picture of the trash after you dumped it. Look." The screen showed the bin, stew slopped inside, time-stamped 9:47 p.m. It was 1:12 a.m. now. "Explain that, Mom." "I can't." I shot back, my heart hammering. Maybe I sleepwalked. Lila laughed, high and unhinged. "You sleepwalked a whole pot of cursed soup back to life? That's your story." "It's not cursed," I yelled, though I wasn't sure anymore. The stew gurgled from the mantel, loud enough to make us all jump. Timmy clapped his hands. "It's Grandpa's magic trick." "Shut up, Timmy," Lila hissed, then spun on me. "This is your fault. You and that stupid recipe. Don't talk to me like that." I fired back. "I'm your mother, not some witch." "Then why is the house acting like a horror show?" Jack cut in, his voice low, dangerous. "First the spoon, now this? What's next, Mom?" "Dad's ghost serving dessert." "Don't be ridiculous," I said, but my eyes flicked to the bowl. The steam twisted again, almost spelling something, H-A-R. I blinked, and it was gone. "It's just a prank. One of you did this." "Us." Lila's jaw dropped. "I've been trying to call an exorcist for the last hour. Jack's been Googling haunted food. And the kids." She glared at Timmy and Rose, who were now poking each other and whispering, "They're possessed or something." "We're not possessed," Rose said, grinning too wide. "We just like the stew show."
Show.
I echoed, dread pooling in my gut. "Yeah," Timmy piped up. "It's better than TV. Watch this." He hopped off the couch, grabbed a poker from the fireplace, and tapped the bowl. The stew hissed, spitting a glob onto the floor. It landed with a wet plop and, God help me, started inching toward us, slow as a slug. Lila screamed again, dropping the lamp. Jack yelped, "What the hell?" And I just stood there, frozen, as that blob quivered, then stopped, like it was waiting. The kids burst out laughing, falling over each other.
"See?
"It's alive," Timmy crowed. "This isn't funny," I shouted, stomping forward. I snatched the bowl from the mantel, the heat searing my hands, and marched to the kitchen. "It's done. I'm done." I dumped it into the sink, turned on the disposal, and watched it grind away, the sound like bones crunching. The note went in next, shredded to bits. When I turned back, they were all staring at me, Lila pale, Jack tense, the kids pouting. "Problem solved," I said, brushing my hands. "Now go to bed." But it wasn't solved. At 3 a.m., I woke to a clatter. Downstairs, the kitchen was a mess. Pots scattered, thyme sprigs strewn like confetti. And there, on the counter, sat a fresh pot of widow's stew, bubbling, with a new note in Harold handwriting. "You can't bury me that easy, Agnes." I didn't scream. I didn't wake the house. I just sank into a chair, staring at that pot, feeling Harold's grin in the dark. Lila was right. This was my fault. I'd woken something, and it wasn't just Stu. It was him, or what was left of him, and he wasn't here to hug me hello. The next morning, I found Jack in the garage, rigging a lock for the trash bin. No more surprises, he muttered, hammering a nail. Lila was on the phone with her friend Marcy, whispering, "She's lost it, I swear. The Stu's stalking us." The kids were outside, drawing chalk outlines of Stu monsters on the driveway, giggling like it was a game. I tried to laugh it off. "You're all overreacting. It's just a recipe gone wild." "Wild," Lila snapped, hanging up. "It's possessed, and you're acting like it's a pet." "Maybe it is," I said, half joking, but her glare could have melted steel. Jack slammed the hammer down. "Mom, this isn't cute. We're locking it out, or I'm calling someone, priest, plumber, I don't care." "Fine," I sighed. "Lock it up. But it's not hurting anyone." That's when Rose ran in, breathless. "Nana, the Stu's in the garden now. It's growing." We rushed outside, and there it was, a puddle of broth seeping from the dirt, sprouting tiny thyme leaves like a nightmare garden. Timmy poked it with a stick, and it gurgled. Lila fainted. Jack cursed. I just laughed. Wild, shaky, because what else could I do? Harold was back, and he'd brought his Stu to the party. I couldn't stop staring at that puddle in the garden, the Stu pooling in the dirt like it had a mind of its own. Tiny thyme sprigs poked up, swaying in the breeze, and every gurgle from that mess sent a shiver down my spine. Lila was sprawled on the grass where she'd fainted, Jack fanning her with a shovel, his face a mix of fury and fear. Timmy and Rose danced around the puddle, chanting, "Stu, Stu, grow some more," like it was a nursery rhyme. I laughed again, sharp, brittle, because if I didn't, I'd scream. "Get her inside," I told Jack, nodding at Lila. He hoisted her up, muttering, "This is your mess, Mom. Fix it." I didn't argue. He was right, but I didn't know how to fix something that wouldn't stay dead. Inside, I brewed tea, normal tea, not Harold's witchcraft, and tried to think. The Stu was out there growing, Lila was a wreck, Jack was one step from bolting, and the kids were treating it like a pet. I'd wanted to bring back a piece of Harold, not unleash whatever this was. The note flashed in my mind. "It wakes what sleeps." What had I woken? Him? Something worse? Lila came to on the couch, groaning. "Tell me that was a nightmare." "Nope," Jack said, slumping into a chair. "Mom Stu's planting roots now. Probably plotting world domination." "Don't be dramatic," I said, handing Lila a mug. She glared at it like it might sprout fangs. "Dramatic," she croaked. I fainted because your soup's alive. "That's not normal, Mom." "It's not my soup," I snapped. "It's your father's. Blame him." "Oh, I will," she said, sitting up. "When I see him in the afterlife, I'm telling him he's a jerk for this." The kids burst in, muddy and grinning. "Nana, it's bigger," Rose chirped. "It's got bubbles now, like a hot tub." "Great," Jack muttered. "A spa for Satan Stu." "Stop it," I said, but I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. "We'll dig it up. End this." "Dig it up." Lila's eyes widened. "What if it fights back?" "It's Stu, not a bear." I shot back, grabbing a shovel from the hall. "Come on." Outside, the puddle had spread, a foot wide now, dark and glossy, with thyme sprouting like a tiny forest. Bubbles popped on the surface, releasing that sharp, wrong smell. I stabbed the shovel in, and the ground squelched, loud and wet. The Stu recoiled, pulling back like it was offended, then surged forward, splashing my boots. I yelped, jumping away. "Told you." Lila shrieked from the porch. "It's alive." "It's not alive," I yelled, though I wasn't sure anymore. I dug again, deeper, and hit something hard. Metal clinked against the shovel. "What the?" Jack knelt beside me, brushing dirt away. "It's the tin?" He pried it loose, a rusted biscuit tin, Harold's old favorite for hiding things. The Stu hissed around it, bubbling faster. like it was mad we'd found its prize. Open it, Timmy urged, bouncing on his toes. Rose nodded. Yeah, maybe it's treasure. Or a bomb, Jack muttered, but he popped the lid. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with twine, and a photo, me and Harold, young and laughing, in front of the barn. The stew quieted, the bubbles slowing, like it was watching. Lila snatched a letter, unfolding it with shaky hands. It's Dad's writing. Agnes, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. The stew's more than a recipe. It's me, or what's left. I buried it to keep it quiet. Don't cook it, love. It'll wake me up, and I won't be the same. The air went still. My chest tightened. He knew. There's more, Jack said, grabbing another. If it's too late, burn the pot. It's the only way. I love you, Agnes. Always. His voice broke on that last word, and I felt tears prick my eyes. He's in the stew? Lila whispered, horrified. Like his soul? No, I said too fast. That's ridiculous. It's just a prank. A weird Harold prank. Then why's it growing? Jack demanded, pointing at the puddle, now creeping toward the roses. Why's it acting like it owns us? Because it's Grandpa. Timmy giggled. He's gardening now. Shut up, Timmy. Lila and Jack yelled in unison, and I couldn't help it. I laughed again, loud and wild. They stared at me like I'd lost it, and maybe I had. We burned the pot, I said finally, wiping my eyes. Like he said. But when we got to the kitchen, the pot was gone. The counter was bare, the sink empty. A trail of broth led to the back door, open just a crack. Rose peeked out and gasped. It's in the shed. We ran, hearts pounding. The shed door hung ajar, and inside, the pot sat on Harold's old workbench, steaming, surrounded by tools like it was building something. A new note lay beside it. Missed me, didn't you, Agnes? Lila screamed again. Jack swore, and the kids clapped like it was a circus. I just stood there, feeling Harold's shadow wrap around me, warm and cold at once. He was back, all right, stubborn, ridiculous, and haunting me with every bubble. And somehow, despite the terror, I smiled. I couldn't tear my eyes off that pot, steaming on Harold's workbench like it was staging a comeback tour. The shed smelled of rust and time, and that note, missed me, didn't you, Agnes? Sat there taunting me in his familiar scrawl. Lila was still screaming, her voice bouncing off the walls, while Jack gripped a hammer like he might smash the pot. Or me. Timmy and Rose perched on a crate, kicking their legs, grinning like this was the best day of their lives. I wanted to yell, cry, maybe hug that stupid pot, but all I did was step closer. Mom, don't. Lila grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. It's a trap. It's a pot, I said, shaking her off. Harold's pot. He's not trapping me, he's talking. Talking? Jack barked, waving the hammer. It's a kitchen appliance, with a vendetta. We need to end this. End, Grandpa. Rose gasped, clutching Timmy's arm. You can't kill him again. He's already dead. Lila snapped, then clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. I mean, oh, God. What am I saying? I ignored them, reaching for the note. The paper was warm, like it had just been written. My fingers brushed the pot, and it hummed low, deep, like a heartbeat. I froze. Harold? I whispered. The stew bubbled, loud and sharp, splashing over the rim. A glob hit the workbench, sizzling, and the tools rattled, screwdrivers, wrenches, a saw, all clattering like they were waking up. Lila yelped, It's possessed, and Jack swung the hammer, missing the pot by an inch. The kids cheered. Do it again. Stop it, I shouted, shoving Jack back. You'll break it. That's the point, he roared. It's breaking us. Look at this. Tools moving, stew growing, notes from a dead man. You've lost it, Mom, and we're all paying for it. I haven't lost anything. I fired back, my voice cracking. I've found him. He's here, Jack, your father, their grandfather. He's trying to tell us something. Tell us what? Lila demanded, tears streaking her face. That he's a soup ghost? That he hates us. He doesn't hate us, I said, softer now, staring at the pot. He loved us. Loves us still. The shed went quiet, except for the stew's soft simmer. Then Timmy piped up, maybe he's lonely, like when I miss my goldfish. Goldfish don't haunt people, Jack muttered, but he lowered the hammer, his shoulders slumping. I picked up the pot, cradling it like a baby. It was hot, heavier than before, and the broth swirled, dark and deep. Harold, if you're in there, say something, please. A bubble popped, loud as a gunshot. The lights flickered, and a shadow stretched across the shed wall, tall, broad, Harold's shape, fishing hat and all. Lila gasped, Jack dropped the hammer, and the kids clapped like it was a magic trick. The shadow lingered, then faded, leaving a new note on the bench. Burn it, Agnes. Set me free. My throat tightened. Free? From what? From this. Lila cried, pointing at the pot. He's stuck in there, Mom. You cooked him back, and now he's trapped. No, I whispered, clutching the pot tighter. He's not trapped. He's home. Home, Jack laughed, bitter and wild. This isn't home. It's a nightmare. We've got a stew that won't die, a shed turning into a seance, and you're acting like it's a family reunion. Maybe it is, I said, meeting his glare. Maybe he missed us so much he found a way back. The pot hummed again, softer this time, and I swear I felt it lean into me, warm and familiar. Lila sank onto the crate, sobbing. This is insane. I can't handle this. Then leave, I said, sharper than I meant. But I'm not giving him up again. Jack stared at me, then at the pot, then threw his hands up. Fine. You win. Keep your ghost stew. But when it starts a cult, don't call me. He stormed out, Lila trailing after him, muttering about therapy. The kids stayed, scooting closer. Can we talk to Grandpa too? Rose asked, poking the pot. It bubbled, almost playful, and Timmy giggled. He says hi. I smiled, tears blurring my vision. Hi back, I whispered, setting the pot down. The tools stopped rattling, the air lightened, and for a moment, it felt like Harold was there, really there, laughing at our chaos, loving us through it. But that night, I woke to a crash. The shed door was wide open, the pot gone. Footprints, big, muddy, Harold's size, tracked across the yard, leading to the woods. A note was pinned to the workbench. Couldn't stay, Agnes. Love you too much to haunt you. I sank to my knees, laughing and crying at once. He'd left again, but this time, it felt like a gift, a ridiculous, heart-wrenching goodbye, wrapped in stew and shadows. I knelt there in the shed, Harold's last note trembling in my hands. Couldn't stay, Agnes. Love you too much to haunt you. The muddy footprints stretched out the door, fading into the woods like a trail of breadcrumbs I couldn't follow. The pot was gone, the air cold and empty, and my chest ached with a mix of relief and loss. He'd slipped away again, my stubborn, stew-slinging Harold, leaving me with a story too wild to tell anyone sane. The sun was barely up when I trudged back to the house, the note tucked in my pocket. Lila was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, her eyes puffy from crying. Jack slouched at the table, staring at his phone like it might explain the last few days. Timmy and Rose were sprawled on the floor, drawing pictures of Grandpa Stu with crayons, giggling like nothing had happened. I almost envied them. He's gone, I said, my voice rough. Took the pot and left. Lila froze, coffee pot in hand. Gone? Like, for good? I nodded, pulling out the note. She snatched it, reading fast, then handed it to Jack. He scanned it, snorted, and tossed it on the table. Figures. Dad always had to make an exit. He didn't want to hurt us, I said, sinking into a chair. That's why he left. Hurt us. Lila's laugh was sharp, jagged. Mom. He turned our lives into a circus. I've got stew trauma now, I'll never eat soup again. Could have been worse, Jack muttered. Could have stayed and started a stew empire. The kids perked up. Ooh, Grandpa's stew shop. Timmy chirped, waving a crayon. With ghost delivery. Stop encouraging him, Lila snapped, but a smile twitched her lips. I caught it and grinned, too, first real one in days. We should have known, I said, leaning back. Harold never did anything halfway. Even his goodbyes a mess. A mess? Jack raised an eyebrow. Mom, we had a pot throwing tantrums, a garden growing broth, and a shed seance. That's not a mess. That's a disaster movie. With a happy ending, Rose added, holding up her drawing, a stick figure, Harold waving from a bubbling pot. He's free now, right, Nana? I looked at that goofy sketch, and my throat tightened. Yes, sweetie, he's free. Lila poured coffee, sliding a mug my way. So, what now? We just pretend this didn't happen? No, I said, sipping the brew. Bitter, normal, no shadows in it. We remember it. All of it. The crazy, the scary, the love. It's ours. Jack groaned, but his eyes softened. You're impossible, you know that? Runs in the family. I shot back, and he chuckled. First time I'd heard that sound since this started. That afternoon, we cleaned up. Jack hauled the trash bin back, muttering about stew-proof locks. Lila scrubbed the shed, swearing at every time sprig she found. The kids ran around, staging a stew funeral with a bucket of water and dramatic wails. Timmy even threw in a rest in broth, Grandpa. That had me laughing till I cried. But the real surprise came at dusk. I was in the garden, pulling up those eerie thyme sprouts, when I found it, a small, dented tin buried where the stew had pooled. Inside was a single recipe card, not in Harold's writing but mine. Agnes's peace pie. It read, apples, cinnamon, a dash of hope. A note was scrawled on the back. Make this instead, love. No ghosts, just us. My hands shook as I held it. I hadn't written this, not recently, not ever that I remembered. But it felt like me, like him, like a promise stitched together from years of us. I carried it inside, showed the family, and for once, no one argued. We baked that pie together, Lila peeling apples, Jack rolling dough, the kids sneaking bites. The kitchen filled with warm, sweet air, nothing bubbling or hissing, just us bickering and laughing. When it came out, golden and perfect, we sat around the table, passing slices. Timmy declared, "This is better than stew," and Rose nodded. No ghosts in this one. I took a bite and it hit me Harold wasn't gone, not really. He'd left me this, a way to heal the chaos he'd stirred. The pie was soft, sweet, a little messy, like us. Lila reached over, squeezed my hand, and Jack raised his fork in a mock toast. To Dad. And to never cooking stew again. Amen, I said, and we all laughed, the sound echoing through the house, chasing out the last shadows. That night, I slept deep, no crashes, no notes, just quiet. The woods stayed still, the shed empty. Harold was free, and so were we, tangled, ridiculous, and somehow whole again with a pie to prove it.